Sergeant Jason Vance, the Louisville Metro Police Department's Public Integrity Unit. Today's date is Tuesday, May 19th, 2020, and it's 1,300 hours. We're here present at 3672 Taylor Boulevard at the Public Integrity Office. This is a recorded statement from Lieutenant Del Massey. The statement is referenced to PIU case number 20-019. Present with me is Lieutenant Del Massey. Attorney is not present, and Sergeant Jeremy Roof of the Public Integrity Unit. Lieutenant, are you aware that this statement is being video and audio recorded?
Yes, I am.
Does this meet with your approval?
It does.
Sir, please state your full name and spell your last name.
Larry D. Massey Jr., Massey.
And sir, what's your code number?
2459.
And where are you currently assigned?
SWAT, Special Operations Division.
And how long have you been in that unit?
In the unit, 3.5 years.
And how long have you been with the department?
19 and a half.
Are you under the influence of alcohol, drugs, or any other intoxicants at this time?
No, I'm not.
Are you taking any kind of medication that would affect your judgment or your ability to think clearly?
No, I'm not.
So this form, covers multiple things. We're going to bypass this because it doesn't cover this. Because the statutory requirements of KRS 67C.326, I'm obligated to advise you that this is a criminal investigation, not an administrative investigation. However, you are not the subject of this investigation. Knowing this, are you willing to give us a statement this time?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So what this is a reference to is that, we had a officer-involved shooting on March the 13th at 3003 Springfield Drive in the 3rd Division. And as a result, reviewing body cam footage and also just knowing, the course of investigation is that obviously SWAT responded to that location and cleared it, secured it, if you will, prior to PIU's arrival. In reviewing some of the documentation provided to us by CID, we did not receive a operations plan. So one of the questions we wanted to see if you guys were, I know you all had a briefing before the search warrants because there was multiple search warrants served that night. Is it some of the information that you all gathered from the briefing, and what information were you all provided before that night?
Okay, we got to backtrack. So we got information on these warrants probably about a month in advance. It was going to be a pretty much large-scale operation. Sergeant Cassie and Sergeant Burns are kind of the points on it. So what kind of happens now with us is that when we plan our high-risk warrants, they'll call me, get with the sergeant. The sergeant kind of gets to the planning phase, and we kick it down to our officers to do the recons and start our planning process, for that matter. They had a meeting about a month prior, and they brought up multiple locations, and our guys advised them, hey, we need to take this slower. We're not going to do 8 warrants in one night, simultaneous warrants. We're out of that business now just because of the inherent danger of it, doing 2 locations at once. How about we do 2 this day, 2 the next day, and so on and so forth. And there was mention of the address on Springfield in an email sent to Joe Cassie. Fast forward to the week before, so they give us 2 addresses. Both of them are on Elliott. One's a vacant. We're across the street from each other. Detective James comes in the night of the warrant to do the briefing. We brief both of them up on his end and our end. So he'll give us the intel behind his case, what he's learned, what should we encounter there. Easily enough for us, we've done the address on Elliott. It was our 5th time, I think, in 18 months doing it. So we have a pretty good idea of what that house is like. And the vacant next door, we dealt with that as well. He goes through his whole brief, giving us his intel on his side. So then we go through our briefing, our tactical planning. So what we've done since going full-time is we've completely overhauled how we plan warrants. Back in the day, we would take a lot of detective information and take it as golden. Not anymore, because so often there's no kids, there's no dogs, we're told, there's kids and dogs. So we have an exhaustive recon process that we go through. He made mention of another address, 2605 West Ali that night. And said something defective, we're going to do that later. Like a later date's how I took it. At no point did I ever hear the word Springfield mentioned in the briefing. Someone else may have, I never heard it. It was never said that, hey, we're doing any other warrants. We rolled out to go to Elliott with the understanding that we were the only ones doing warrants that night, okay? Roll up on scene, so they're across the street from each other, so it's kind of a tactical dilemma. Jeremy can attest to this. You're trying to plate this house while you're working this house. There was like 10 or 12 people in this house. So I'm in the Bearcat in the middle of both locations, kind of just surveying what's going on. We're about, 2 or 3 minutes into working the door. We're calling people out. And on our SWAT 1 channel, we hear shots fired. So we're like, wait a second, shots fired. Is everybody good? My guys get on the radio. I believe Aaron's like, yeah, we're good at the breach point, whatever. So then I believe Sergeant Luke Fong comes on our SWAT channel and said, yeah, Springfield, gives the address. We got an officer involved shooting. I'm in the Bearcat. So we kind of gather our bearings. So we're like, what are you talking about? Again, back to the point is we had no idea they were doing a warrant at the same time we were. Gather our bearings, kind of get up a QRT together. I know it was me, Sergeant Burns, Sergeant Cassie, Sergeant Hogan. I know Scott Walker was driving the Bearcat. I believe Chris Baker. There was about 10 of us that went over to Springfield. So we leave Elliott, get to Springfield. There was some kind of, as these chaotic situations unravel, like the address they gave at first was a different address than they were actually at. So it took a little bit to get there. We had to actually ram the Bearcat through a chain link fence because it was just a one-way in, one-way out kind of street. Get there, and we pulled the Bearcat up pretty much to the one side of the apartment, the driver's side door. And I see to my right a row of police cars, and what I would have to guess would be 20 officers with long guns pointed directly at the door, the sliding glass door. I believe I see Lieutenant Hoover and Lieutenant Shaw just kind of in the area. So we're kind of getting our plan together. As we're rolling up, we're getting intel, hey, the shooter's been 10-15. He's over here. He said there's a female inside or something to that. But again, as chaotic as these scenes are, the exact verbiage. But to that effect, I was really confident that there was not going to be any more resistance in the house, but we were trying to go check on the possible female, right? So it's preservation of life. So I kind of talking to Major Shine, Lieutenant Hoover, I'm like, man, get over here behind cover, because when I initially get there, as I'm looking through that sliding glass window, our initial thought is, oh, they're shooting out the window at the police, right? Or at the door, I should say. Get some more intel. I send a team up there, and I kind of stay behind the Bearcat. I tell all the patrol officers, check your rifles up, because they're still literally just pointing, and they don't know what they're pointing at, more or less. I mean, the target identification, there's nothing to point at because there's curtains and everything else. You're just pointing a gun, Get a plan together. They roll up, go on the one side. I believe they throw our throwbot, Ricky inside, and they can see down the hallway. They can see a person down. I mean, it was plain as day. So they go in, search it, possibly any more hurt people, whatever. Come back out, give the all clear. The patrol officers were holding something on the 3 side. They were holding down another window. There was a white male at it. They had him at gunpoint, but I'm like, that's a different apartment. So that guy back there is fine. So obviously, chaotic scene. Do the best you can when you get there. Try to slow everything down and just try to provide the best service we could and help them as best we could. But getting back to the planning phase, we had no idea they were going to be at that apartment that night.
And as far as the information that you guys received, did you all receive the search warrants? I mean,
yeah. What will happen is they'll do a risk assessment matrix in the search warrants. We get copies of those. I've gone to the extra length now where I make them require them to give me a HIDA number for the extra layer of safety, because in the past we've done warrants for different units where multiple units were looking at it, and unbeknownst to us, because we're a support unit, so HIDA number. Some detectives go above and beyond. We have a PowerPoint that they'll do that we've supplied to them. Hey, that gives information. But at the very least, the risk assessment matrix, copy of the HIDA number, and the actual search warrant affidavit is what's required.
And just for the tape, I mean, a HIDA is a deconfliction site.
Correct, yes. Deconfliction site to ensure multiple units aren't planning police action at the same location. It's meant to stop blue-on-blue violence or blue-on-blue shootings.
And during the course of your all's preparation, what significant, if any, information did you all learn beyond what was provided by CID?
This case, not so much, because we've done the houses before on Elliott. We've done it literally 4 or 5 times in 18 months. So we knew we were going to get. They provided some information. I think that the door may be barricaded, but through us going by, hey, we see people in and out freely. We were getting updates as we were rolling there. There's people in and out. I mean, it's a very hot area, that 2400 block of Elliott. So nothing stood out other than there could be possible follow-on warrants later on down the road, but nothing about the 2 locations we were given that night in Elliott. It was just a house we've done before and a vacant. As
far as Springfield goes, once you make it over there and you guys, make it safe and secure it for us, PIU, how long were you on scene after that occurred?
After we called the house all clear?
Secure, yeah.
Wow, man, we didn't stay long after, probably 10 or 15 minutes. Just long enough to where I knew that everybody there was going to be safe. Like, there was no other threats to the police or civilians for that matter, and that they kind of had what they needed. I said a couple things to Major Shy and whoever I believe. I was like, hey, you should probably get an escort officer, figure out who did what. But I said our role is the tactics part's out. I'm not gonna stay part of that. But man, y'all should probably consider a couple things. We're leaving, so probably 10 or 15 minutes.
Now, did you learn any information as far as that incident on Springfield after you guys came out, and why you still remain on scene?
Oh yeah. So originally, when I was there, Detective Cosgrove was providing the best intel and best information out of anybody, hands down. He had a rifle slung, so I assumed, just having a rifle slung, that he was there after the fact. Okay, so I know Mattingly's involved in it. While we're on scene, we learn that Cosgrove's involved in it. Like, I had no idea he was part of it. And then through the course of, Sergeant Burns will attest to this, a couple of the guys went to neighboring apartments to ensure there was no other casualties due to the gunfire. And I know at one point they were pointing at the window, and Detective Hankinson looked over and kind of made a motion like that, like tapped his chest almost to say, yeah, that was me type thing. So as we were on scene, it became pretty apparent to us what we thought happened, as far as what happened initially at the breach point, and then where those however many rounds were fired through the windows and the doors.
You said you learned that Cosgrove was involved. Did he tell you that, or were you told from another person?
I was told by somebody else, because I was like, man, get him out of the mix, because he was still in the mix doing stuff. I was like, get him separated from everybody.
Who told you that?
I don't remember. I really don't.
And was he removed from the scene?
I don't think so.
Okay.
And I don't, like I said, so we're all there, and it's obviously hectic, like I said before, but I do remember saying, hey, separate him. He's involved. He was way too up in the mix,
Sergeant Bird?
LT, going back to the briefing, I know there were two on Elliott they talked about, one on Ali, and it was decided Ali would be done at another time.
That was my interpretation.
There was no mention of Springfield. Through our investigation, we've learned up to this point from the information provided by CID that Springfield was directly related to Elliott.
Mm-hmm.
Is it common with the amount of warrants you do for CID and other I guess, units, if you have a site that is linked to other sites, would that be briefed during that time?
Oh, 100%. We should have knowledge of what they're doing. And kind of not to get too caught in a rabbit hole here. Since going full time, the team has come millions of miles. It's not because of me; it's because of the guys. We treat safety very important, right? So, like, simultaneous warrants, bad business. Something goes down, like we just saw. Who's there to provide armor? Our priorities are people, right? So, like, to us, we need to be briefed on everything, but at the same time, like, there's been some understanding in narcotics and in CID that we're not going to rush in to get dope. We're not going to treat human life more important than any amount of dope, right? So with the times, our tactics have changed as well. So they should definitely let us know as far as what they're doing so we can provide assistance. Because on a case like that, hey, if y'all absolutely have to do Springfield, y'all sit there and watch it. We can send some guys over. Or if y'all are going to do it, let us give you the all clear first so we can push armor your way to be able to support them. From CID, I don't know how many warrants they do a year because we don't do every single one of them, obviously. But we always try to just push them the safest way they can do their warrants, if that makes sense. So they should definitely brief us on any location they're going to be at during a brief, just so we know.
Okay. And back to that point, I guess the Elliott was deemed at the time, I guess those were the two targets. Was it known at the time the targets were at that location, or were there unknowns where...
I want to say there was two main targets, and forgive me, I don't remember the names. I want to say that they did a vehicle takedown on one, or maybe two, that left the location, and one of the other targets, there was like 3 or 4 targets. I think at least one was in the house, and I think 2 were taken down as we were en route or as we were working on the first house on Elliott. But the timing of that, and I don't know which one was the main target versus the secondary target, but they provided like 3 or 4 different names.
Okay. You had mentioned an email to Sergeant Cassie about Springfield, and I guess he may have more intimate knowledge of that. But was that around the same time the other warrants came in, like a month prior to?
Well, I was on a conference call with Colonel Chavis, Major Gregory, Major Burbrink, and myself talking about debriefing this incident, kind of what we can learn from it. Because I think there was I heard some things that came from the initial interviews from PIU that said SWAT and narcotics, or CID weren't communicating effectively, and that was brought to my attention that maybe it was my fault, maybe it wasn't, so we had a clearing of the air. That was the first time I was ever made aware of that email because she provided a copy of it for me. But I don't think I ever received the initial email, and if we did, it was 30 days prior, so unless you mention it in a briefing or tell us in a subsequent meeting, we're not going to remember that you said Springfield a month earlier.
Okay, and Colonel Chavis provided that.
I don't know if it was her or Major Burbrink, one of the two.
Okay, so Major Burbrink or...
She brought to my attention, hey, this email existed 30 days, or March, not 30 days, one of the warrants, March 13th?
March 13th.
It may have been March 1st or 2nd. It may have been 2 weeks, 2 weeks to 3 weeks. But I'd have to look through my email. I don't know that I received that email. I may have it. I have to double check. But that was the first time that I recognized that Springfield was mentioned.
Okay. Jason, you have anything else about Springfield?
Yeah. As far as that, I guess you all had a meeting afterwards, like a debriefing meeting. I mean, clearly you had some concerns that night.
100%.
Did you voice them that night to anyone, and who did you voice them to, if any?
We talked internally as a team, figuring that at some point we would be called in here because A, we had the body cam footage. B, I think we were the most unaffected by what happened because we were there after the fact. Obviously, we weren't there for the initial shooting. And generally, my guys, because they're in more stressful situations, can process information and slow things down. Mm-hmm. So we talked about it internally. 100%. And, that's why I was kind of alluding to earlier, like our priorities are people. Like dope's way down here. So that's why we move slower. That's why we mitigate our actions. And going back, I know it's really big in the media about the no-knock thing. So these no-knock warrants, if they provide me with a no-knock warrant, you know what we do? We knock and announce. Okay? The only time we'll do a no-knock warrant is if we will press one if we're going to do an explosive breach charge at the breach point, where you can't make announcements, right? And we usually reserve those for homicide suspects. So we even take the extra step, it's a no-knock warrant, but we're still going to knock and announce our presence just because of the initial danger at the breach point.
Well, that's actually a good question. Did CID request a no, or did you tell CID that you all requested a no-knock on Elliott?
Did not. We've done Elliott in the past. Elliott, when you enter if y'all were, well, you've never been to Elliott, you enter a common area, and that's where they do a lot of the drug sales and a lot of the drug users hang out at. Every time we've gone in that house, we've encountered people immediately at the threshold. We don't even enter the house. We called them out to us. So we called every single person out to us on Elliott. I left that time, but the time before, call everybody out, send the robot in, then we go in and secure it. So that house had like trapdoors and stuff too.
And had you known that CID was going to serve that warrant on Springfield, would you advise them not to do that?
I would advise them 100% not to do it until we were done doing what we had to do. Like I said, we can't do every single.
Thank God.
We can't do every single warrant for them, and then. So if she was that low in the Matrix, which I never saw that Matrix, so frankly I can't speak to what she would have showed up as on the Matrix at all. I don't know. And I've told people, like, when you use a SWAT team, it's a higher level of force. So we can't do every single warrant the way we would do a SWAT warrant. But I most definitely would have told them, hey, wait till we're done and can move some armor to you, or give them alternate options. Hey, we can send 4 or 5 guys over there after the fact just to do a surround call out, because if the warrant's for money, which is my understanding of what it was, is if it's people and money in there, you can't really destroy money. They're not going to destroy money. Just call them out to you. Like, if you want to breach the door, make announcements. This is the police, So we generally tend to treat ours more that way. It's just the way we operate tactically and the way CID operates tactically they're completely different.
And not to beat a dead horse, but on the briefing to Elliott, there's no mention of Springfield. So is it safe to say no matrix or ops plan, anything, or no knowledge whatsoever about a warrant being conducted at the same time at the Springfield?
No whatsoever. I'll take a step further. I've never received a matrix from CID that we didn't do the warrant on. And that's a policy thing, so it's not a you-all thing. But I never received matrices on the work that they do, only the ones that we do for them.
What about the operations plan? Did y'all receive one on this?
No.
So nothing?
And still haven't to this point?
On Springfield, no.
Okay.
What about Elliott? Did you receive one there?
So when we do their warrants, we kind of do our own ops plan. So if they provide us the information, like I said, going back to the past about we wanted to get our own eyes on, look at it. So I would say the information they provide, we come up with our own operations plan because our planning process is more intensive than theirs. So as long as they bring the warrant and the matrix, I mean, we get the plan to put it together ourselves because we're the ones that's going to be executing it.
Okay.
Back out at Springfield, when you all arrived on scene, you had mentioned something when you first arrived on scene. It was your initial thoughts that officers were receiving fire through a sliding glass door.
Yes.
Can you kind of expand on that a little bit? Or?
So as we were getting there, we hear that there's automatic gunfire. There's a rifle in play. There's a rifle in play. We kept on hearing that over and over again. So my assumption was when I saw the number of what I thought to be initially exit bullets through the windows and sliding glass doors, I just assumed, I was like, hey, well, that's where they shot at as they're making their approach. And then I figure out, no, it's at the breach point. So then it becomes pretty readily apparent to me that those rounds, after 3 or 4 minutes, they came from outside. So those rounds that went inside that I thought initially were coming out were actually going in the apartment.
Okay. And you may or may not remember because a while has gone past, but on that sliding glass door, do you remember, were there shades or anything over that door? Could you see into the apartment?
You cannot see anything in the apartment. I want to say it was those white vertical blinds, but I could be wrong. It was something. There was definitely a white barrier in that, and you couldn't see any of the windows either that I could see. I mean, because we couldn't even see any light or darkness. It was just, like I said, just a white. I believe they're vertical blinds.
Okay. And in your all's training and experience and training through the department, is it pretty much given that we're trained to, you have to identify a target as part of training and just kind of your all's continued training?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, target identification and knowing what your backdrop is are probably the two most important things as far as when you fire your weapon. 100%. Like, you have to know, A, what you're shooting at, B, what's in front of it, and B, what's behind it. There's no other way you can operate.
Okay. And this is a question I'm not sure you can answer, or either you're the appropriate person to ask this, but, since you have a lot of weapons training and experience, if someone is to fire a weapon in an illuminated area into a darkened area, would that muzzle flash project into that dark area?
If it's covered by cloth, windows and stuff, no, you wouldn't see anything.
Okay.
All you're going to do is hear what would probably be a very rapid firing of gun that you could mistake for a rifle, maybe. I don't know. But you wouldn't be able to see it if they're at the breach point. Because, again, like I said, initially we were like, oh, they're coming outside, and then we moved over, kind of saw the door. Oh, there's the door, and then they had worked on Sergeant Manley right in front of it. So I was like, okay, and that's when I got, like I said, the more information. No, it happened over here.
And one more question. So this table is about 36 inches wide, and the entry door at this apartment was 36 inches. Well, just the biggest entry door they have. Is it practical, or is it even common for not just SWAT? I mean, clearly SWAT works; they have different tactics. But for any, CID unit, investigative unit, when they do an entry into a house, would it be common for 3 people to be in what we consider the fatal funnel?
Absolutely not. No.
So in your almost 20 years, have you ever seen where someone's punched out like this, cover 2, if you will, so first light, cover 2 is punched out, maybe behind him a little bit, and then there's a third person between the first light and cover 2? Have you ever seen that?
No. Not in any kind of scenario where you would train it. Now, I can't speak to what kind of stuff goes on the street, but no, you would never put, yourself in that situation.
But even, in your experience and just, I know you had experience in the 2nd Division Impact or Flex Platoon. Have you ever seen anyone on a police department do that?
No.
Back to the scene on Springfield when you arrived, you mentioned you had learned Detective Cosgrove actually had fired his weapon. And I think you may have said it and I missed it. You advised someone that he should probably be secured.
Yes.
Who was that?
I don't know. I mean, I may have said some Lieutenant Hoover. Because it was because you had the 3rd Division Major was there, and then you had their lieutenant. I don't know if Lieutenant Hoover was there from the beginning, but I remember saying, I believe it was the Lieutenant Hoover, man, you need to have him separated. He was too involved with what was going on when we got there. He needed to be checked out. Like, he needed to be off to the side. The emotions, the adrenaline dump. He provided me with great information. Don't get me wrong; he had the best intel, but he still needed to be out of the mix.
Okay, so at that point, the major of the division.
He was already on scene when I got there. They had another situation in the 3rd that evening they called me about. It didn't rise to our level of needing to assist, so we went ahead with with the warrants on Elliott. So by the time I got there, there was he was there. There was probably 70, 80 police cars. I mean, we had to come from 1200 block of Elliott all the way. I mean, we were probably on the road for a good 20, 25 minutes, or 20 minutes just getting there to the barricade. It took us that long. So yeah, he was already there.
Okay. Other than in how our structure on the department set up with officers/detectives, sergeants, lieutenants, majors, and up above, Lieutenant Hoover would have been in charge of that activity or that warrant.
If he was there for this execution, yes.
If he was there for the beginning of it. Trying to think.
But then it kind of gets murky whenever a major shows up. Hey, that's not my unit, but it's your division, so then the whole ICS, but...
Okay. I forgot
That's
what I was
all right.
going to ask. But
Just a few more questions, LT.
Sure.
Are there any other questions we have not asked you, or any other information you have that may be beneficial to this case?
I mean, just based upon what we saw that night, not having been privy to any of the investigation, just the and not so much my interaction with Detective Hankerson, but with my guys, we just got the feeling that night that something really bad happened, and that the target identification, we don't think, and again, we didn't do the investigation, just based upon our initial what we saw, what we were told, kind of how we replayed the thing, because we want everybody to be safe, right? That's our ultimate goal. Is we don't want us to get hurt, innocent people, and even the bad guys. I mean, if no one's got to die, they don't have to die. Like, that's $14,000 isn't worth it. Any amount of dope's not worth it either. As we debriefed and kind of looked over, it was just an egregious act. I mean, from our perspective, if that's in fact what happened. I mean, if other details come to light, it is what it is. But it seemed like that there's no target identification whatsoever for those rounds that were shot outside the apartment.
Any follow-up?
on Elliott, who was in charge other than you all? Can you think of any command who was in charge down there from CID or?
Sergeant Fawn was there. I don't remember. Was Lieutenant Huckleberry there? I don't think he was. I think Colonel Chavis was out with them that night, though. I mean, I think she was out riding around. She may have been on LA with us. I don't know if Major Burbank was out or not. So none of them came to our briefing. The only person from narcotics or CID that came to our briefing was Detective James. He's the only person that we knew for a fact was there, and then he told us, hey, I got Sergeant Fawn on the backside, and he may have mentioned some other people that were there, but they were already in place and had the eye because of those cars. So I know James is the one that came to actually Springfield, to brief us at Naval Ordnance.
Okay, which isn't uncommon.
It's not
if
uncommon.
He's the lead investigator.
Not uncommon whatsoever. We actually prefer to have less people in there because
Okay.
if you have 30 people in there, it gets too loud anyway, and you can't hear the brief. And
Okay.
Is there anything you want to state for the record before we end?
no,
Is everything you told me the truth, the best of your knowledge?
yes.
We will now conclude the statement. Time now is approximately 13:28 hours.